Wayne here.
Oh, hey, Bruce, old boy. I mean, Mr. Wayne. Hey, I was just curious if, I'm getting ready to start out season 3 of Batman Beyond, and wondering if you would like to join me as like a co-host.
No deal.
No, I don't think you understand. I'm a huge fan. I of course, would give you top billing, and could probably work out some sort of payment arrangement.
I understand perfectly.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. This is the channel where we go and look at shows and cartoons and movies that we grew up on in the 80s and 90s and a little bit into 2000. And today, we're jumping into the first episode of the third and final season of Batman Beyond with the King's Ransom, which originally aired on September 16th, 2000.
Hurry, we haven't got all night.
Well, I believe this is the final appearance of the Royal Flush Gang, and I really am enjoying the stories that they have centered around the Royal Flush Gang, and such a unique villain. It's very much a throwback to the old 60s kind of style of a themed or a gimmick kind of villain. And yeah, it's a little cheesy. There's a lot of puns in there, but it's just a fun kind of episode. But before we get into all that, we're going to give you the 60-second Beyond Bomb rundown. And today we do have a special guest, a viewer like you, giving us the 60-second rundown of this episode. Take it away, my friend.
So the episode starts out at a museum for antiquities where the Royal Flush Gang is breaking in without number 10 to steal a Jaguar statuette. Batman comes there and they get into a fight. The Jaguar statuette's ear breaks, but they get away. Batman only captures the Jacks from the team. It then turns out the gang has stolen the Jaguar statuette for President of Wayne's company, Paxton, but he doesn't want to pay for it since it's broke. Then the gang gets furious and they kidnap him. Then Batman goes to Melanie, who now works at a restaurant, and asks if she knows anything, but she doesn't. The king then asks Bruce for ransom for Paxton and agrees to take a crown from him, Paxton's stolen art collection, and use that as ransom. But Paxton doesn't like this because he will get in trouble later for this stolen art collection. And damn it, I knew I couldn't do it. But anyway, Paxton then comes up with the idea that they should kill Bruce because then he can't tell about Paxton's stolen art collection later. So they set up this trade-off and attack Bruce, and Batman is there, and the Flush Gang gets into a fight, and the king escapes with the crown, and it then turns out that he has been working with Paxton's bodyguard from the inside, and this bodyguard is also apparently the king's mistress now. The queen shows up there and is furious for the king's betrayal, and turns out he wanted to get out, so he and this female bodyguard to Paxton worked together to steal his entire art collection, so they could get out because he got tired of the pressure of being the king of the gang, because the previous king was apparently much better. But they all get put in jail by Batman, and then Melanie has bailed out Jax, who was in jail, and she offers him a job at the restaurant where she works at. I wasn't even close, but thanks for including me.
So close, and yet so far. See, I told you it's not as easy as it seems. If you're interested in being on the show with your own 60-second rundown, all you have to do is send me a video of you doing the 60-second rundown in the email link. So jump in on the fun and see if you can do it. And maybe you can get featured on the show as well.
We've got to finish the job before we attract any more attention.
I always appreciate it when episodes and shows, especially a show like this that is not necessarily needs to be watched chronologically. A lot of the episodes can kind of hit and miss, and you can jump in anywhere and enjoy the shows. But I do like it when you get an extra benefit when you do watch them in a chronological order sort of way. Like this. Basically pick up where we left off. We see the Royal Flush Gang. If you've been watching the show, you already know who they are, but you also are introduced to them very quickly that you don't need to have watched where they came from.
This used to be Ten's job, remember?
And like I said before, they're just a cool gang. I mean, who wouldn't want to ride around on flying cards? They establish it pretty quickly who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. They also very quickly mention that Ten is not with them now.
Never mention her name again.
Sorry. Which is nice, and it's nice that they acknowledge that, and certainly as the episode goes in, that plays a role and a part in the rest of the story.
There's nothing we can do for him now.
And then we quickly jump into some action. Batman shows up and starts beating him up. I do have to say, this is a bit of a trope that we've been seeing, and that is that we see the villain performing some crime right at the beginning. Batman shows up, tries to stop them, fails, and then has to regroup and readjust and figure out a new plan and then go attack them again.
He knows everything.
I'm not saying that's bad. It's just something that I've been noticing as I've been watching these episodes kind of regularly, that it's a bit of a formula device to get us into the episodes. And this one certainly follows that structure.
It was unavoidable.
But I will say one of the problems with that in this episode is he's faced them before. He should know what he's up against, and at this point they're one less. Ten isn't with them, but then again, she's been the one that's kind of helped him in some ways. I think that works really well when we have a new villain. I don't know if it works as well when it's an already established group of villains like in this case.
We risked our lives.
Also, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but did we know that Ace, the big Ace guy, was a robot? Let me know in the comments if I just missed that in one of the previous episodes that they were in. The rest of them are a family, and then this big brute, apparently, is he just all robot, or is he a robotic suit? What's going on there?
And Ace, we can barely repair him anymore.
You know, so here we are, third and last season, and I'm always interested to know, like, if the actors and producers knew this was going to be their last season, and if they were trying to wrap up some of the storylines, or if it was something that they went through the season, maybe knew the writing was on the wall, that it might be ending soon, or if they chose to end it, or what the situation is. But I do think it kind of stands out to me that there are several voices that have been replaced just in this episode, as well as some of the episodes to come yet. And I always wonder what's the situation there. Is it just that, you know, the budget didn't allow to renegotiate contracts? Some of the performers thought that the show was going to go away and they moved on to other projects. Obviously in animation you have a little bit more of a flexibility to replace voice actors versus where live action, where it's a little bit harder to replace people. Not that that hasn't been done before. Like in this situation, I mean, there's 3 characters that have been replaced in this.
All I'm asking is, who were you working for?
I think the one that's most glaring to me was Barbara Gordon, who was kind of a recurring character throughout the first and second season, and I would love to know what the story was. Something like that feels like it would be the choice of the actor, because especially if you're doing kind of a bit role, not a bit role, but a supporting role in an animated series, like you could probably go in and record most of your lines for several episodes in a day. And what the situation, or maybe there was some friction with the producers, I don't know.
So talk to me.
I lost my place. Let's see here. Something that I kind of appreciate that maybe is annoying to some viewers, but particularly being a fan of some of the older, campier Batman or superhero, I really enjoyed the puns in this episode, as we got from a lot of the Royal Flush Gang.
Guess he decided to cut his losses.
In this episode, we've got some really great puns. In fact, there's a moment where Jack has 2 puns in one line.
Lady, if you think I'm going to fold, you're not playing with a full deck.
But yeah, there's just in general just a lot of great puns in this episode.
Checkmate, Mr. Wayne.
Except for that one. That's kind of, it's a chess pun, but it's close enough.
The whites of their eyes, right?
And here's some more tech from Batman that I feel like we should have by now. The finger on the glass listening tool.
Sounds kind of chilly in the House of Cards.
That seems like that should exist, and it seems like it can be doable. Somebody get on. Apple could make that. I mean, of course, I don't know what the practical application for it would be unless you are a spy, which maybe they do have tech like that. I don't know.
Stop stalling. You're the head of a major multinational corporation.
I really enjoy stories that kind of focus on criminals down on their luck or more practical side of criminals, where we see in this one, where there's some tension between the king and queen.
You're saying you have no money?
What now, my king?
They seem to be having some financial struggles and taking some different jobs or doing jobs for hire, which brings Mr. Powers back into the equation, and then the tables kind of turn on him. So there's some neat little elements in there versus just having the Royal the Royal Flush Gang showing up and stealing some stuff and stopping Batman. It's just kind of a neat little reinterpretation of that, and just makes for just kind of an interesting, enjoyable story when we kind of humanize the villains or make them dealing with regular problems or money struggles. It always seems like in movies and TV shows that we see villains that are just apparently independently wealthy, can get any gear or tech that they need, but yet are still stealing and robbing banks and doing all these nefarious activities when they seem to have it made.
I think 20 million is more than reasonable for your continued good health.
And I really thought as I was watching this that we were just completely going to write off 10 or Melanie in this episode. And we just don't see her for a little while and establish what she's doing. And she's now working at a restaurant and trying to make ends meet, trying to go legit.
Where's Table 5's meatloaf?
We see Batman come in and they reference the things from their past episode, which if you haven't seen my review for that, you can see it up here.
You remember that note I gave you? The one for Terry McGinnis?
But one thing that does kind of bother me is she takes this break, gets a cup of coffee, goes outside to relax, and then, and then Batman shows up and they have this little chat, and then she dumps out this perfectly good cup of coffee.
I guess I don't exist to him either.
It's really the tragedy of the episode, because, I like a good cup of coffee.
Relax. It's not over.
This episode does get kind of lost in the weeds a little bit with all the double crossing and ransoming and blackmailing and just a whole lot of just money mess that's going on. I do like how the interaction with Bruce and Powers, how they don't have a great relationship, but they're tied together because of their company.
Wayne hates me.
And so it makes for some interesting dynamics between them, of them trying to extort more money out of Bruce, which may or may not work, as Powers is indicating. So I like that, but it does get a little confusing. And especially I was thinking for a kid to be watching this, a lot of the money talk get kind of confusing. I mean, even for me as an adult with money, I'm kind of confused. Who owes who? What?
You can have your president back for a mere 20 million credits.
And another great tie-in to the previous episodes where Ace comes in.
They had an ace in the hole.
Which is interesting. Now we have 2 characters named Ace in one episode. I just thought of that.
Luckily, so did I.
But we see Ace, who was featured in the last episode. If you haven't seen that, check it out up here, because we now know that Ace used to be a fighter dog. In dog fights, not the planes, but fights.
Get him off!
But there's a shot in that fight when we get back into the action and Bruce is in the action, which is always kind of neat seeing that, where Bruce sat down and I could have swore he was sitting there eating an orange. And I was like, boy, I guess he's just really needs to take a break, low blood sugar or something. But no, he's taking pills. It's just the animation looked like he had a orange. Maybe it's just me.
What kept you?
Now, I do have to say, a highlight of this episode is the twist there at the end. You know me, I love a good twist. And to find out that the assistant of Powers, who previously we saw kicking some serious butt, the whole time was working with the king.
And the rest of his collection is in the car.
Especially because we laid the groundwork of the tension between the king and the queen. Him living in the shadows of the original king is all just really kind of a neat twist there at the end.
Yes, everything turned out perfectly.
But the line that he has about living in someone else's shadow,
Do you have any idea what it's like living in someone's shadow?
has a double meaning within the episode, because he says, you have no idea. And of course, Terry knows what it's like to live in Batman's shadow.
Actually, I can relate.
But another piece of trivia that I found that gives this line even more meaning is George Lazenby, the voice actor of the King, was also the actor that took over for Sean Connery as James Bond in Her Majesty's, what is it? In the movie On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which again, the name even has kind of a royalty flair to it. But the voice actor knows what it's like to take over for a really popular actor who kind of embodied James Bond and being tasked with taking over for him.
The constant comparison.
Now at this point, we've seen several actors playing James Bond, and it kind of just keeps passing the mantle. But back in 1969 or whatever it was, there was one actor that was James Bond, and it was Sean Connery. And imagine being the actor that's tasked with, okay, now take over for this wildly popular franchise and try to follow in and try to live in Sean Connery's shadow. Just kind of an interesting kind of triple meaning to that line. It's kind of, I don't know if that was the intention or not, but kind of interesting.
Have you flipped your crown?
And of course, at the end, we see Melanie and Jack now both are going straight, and her trying to get him in a legitimate job because he was kind of left behind by the family. And it makes me want to see, I know this is the last appearance of the Royal Flush Gang, but I would like to see where their story goes. And I'm sure there's some stories in the comics that kind of follow that out. But it's kind of interesting that we now have had two members of this gang that leave a life of crime behind. It's kind of a nice ending to the episode.
Hey, we're family, okay?
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it's good. It's fun. I like the Royal Flush Gang. But at the same time, I don't feel like it was anything special. You know, it kind of started out with that same trope of Batman going in there and trying to stop them and having to regroup and come back. I like the twists and turns. It got a little confusing with the whole money situation. I like the ending that of them going straight. But again, it just didn't feel like anything special to really boost this high up on the list. So for all those reasons, it falls at the number 23 spot of my favorite episodes, just below Hidden Agenda, which is kind of interesting to me that when I ranked that episode, it was pretty high up on the list. I can't remember exactly where I had it placed when it first hit the list, but it was pretty high up, and now it's kind of far down on the list. Not that 23 is a bad spot, but is certainly a lot of other episodes came along that I think outranked it. But I do have this episode beating out Egg Baby, mainly because even though I did kind of enjoy that episode for a comedy, kind of lighthearted episode, this one did have more intricacy to the plot that was able to just edge that one out just barely.
Hey, I resent that. Where's my lawyer? I'll sue.
So my question for all of you, speaking of James Bond, who is your favorite James Bond in the franchise, if you're into James Bond? I'm a big fan of Sean Connery, and he's kind of the quintessential James Bond for me as well. But I do have to say, I have really enjoyed Daniel Craig as James Bond. I've been going back and watching some of those newer James Bond movies. They're very different than the originals, but still very fun stories. And he does a very different James Bond, but does a great job. But who is your favorite James Bond? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or share it on your social media. And if you want to see more episodes like this, just hit the subscribe button. That helps boost the analytics and helps me out tremendously here on the channel. Because next up, we're going to be talking about the episode Untouchables, so you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode, and I'll see you soon.